Welcome to the fourth video in the PAA stool building series. In this video, we'll begin cutting the tapers on the legs and creating the half lap joints for the top and bottom cross braces. We'll be integrating some pretty advanced woodworking techniques here, so let's grab your plans and get started. We will begin by cutting the leg tapers at the bandsaw. Make sure the height of the guard is set correctly and begin cutting along the line. Try not to cut the line away because it'll give you a reference for sanding later. Take your time. Try to get out of the cut well before the 5-inch mark on the legs. Cut the other side of the leg using the same process. Once all the legs have been cut, use the belt sander to sand up to the line to create a smooth taper. Move the piece back and forth to create a smooth edge. Do not rush this step. Once you finish with the belt sander, use a palm sander to finish the job. Now it's time to start cutting the first half lap joint. Let's start with the top cross pieces. You'll need several hand tools, including a handsaw, hammer, a wood file called a rasp, a knife, a chisel, and a square. Before you begin cutting, use a utility knife to score the lines for the half lap joint. Use a square to make sure that these lines are accurate. Doing this step will help guide the handsaw and give you a more consistent cut. Use the knife to score the midway line as well on both sides of the piece with the board held securely in a woodworker's vise. Use the handsaw to carefully start cutting along the line. The blade will rest in the score line that you made with the knife. Start cutting straight down. Make sure to not angle the blade and cut all the way down to your midway line. Make sure you hit the line on both sides of the piece. Now, move the saw blade over 1/4 inch and repeat the same step. Make a series of cuts that are 1/4 inch apart, each time hitting the midway line until you reach the other side of the notch. Flip the piece vertically and secure with the woodworker's vise. Using a chisel and a hammer, begin slowly removing material from one side. Be careful not to remove too much at once. Take your time here and make sure the flat edge of the chisel is facing you. Once you remove some material from one side, flip the piece over and repeat the process from the other side. Clean up the notch as much as possible with the chisel, but never chisel towards yourself. When the notch is removed, use a rasp to even out the cut. Repeat for the other crosspiece. You may need to do some more filing or sand until they can fit together easily. Moving on to the bottom cross pieces. Just as before, use a knife to score the lines. Use a square to make sure those lines are accurate. Use a handsaw to carefully cut down to your midway mark on both sides. Be sure to not angle the saw and cut straight up and down. Once you've hit your midway mark on both sides, use a chisel to gently knock out the notch. You may need to flip it over and chisel from the other side. Repeat the same process on the other piece. Use a thin piece of wood with some sandpaper to clean up the notch until the two pieces slot together easily. Find the bottom brace template on the pegboard to mark out the curves. Line the 5-degree angles on the template with the angles on your piece. Notice how the curve is cut on the bottom of one piece and the top of the other. This means that the lines will match up after cutting. Check with your instructor to ensure that you've done this correctly. Then you can begin cutting your curves on the bandsaw. No need for relief cuts here. Just follow your line carefully and take your time. When you finish cutting on the bandsaw, head over to the spindle sander to clean up your cuts. Finally, use a palm sander to sand all of your pieces to 220 grit. It's much easier to sand now before assembling the joints. Then, grab yourself a bottle of glue and a pair of F-clamps. Add some glue to each joint, spreading it around with your finger, and then secure your piece with the clamp. No need to over tighten here. Clean up any glue that squeezes out of the joint, and finally check your pieces to make sure that they are sitting square. And that's it for this step. Make sure your name is on each of the pieces, and then find a safe space for your materials in the project storage room. Please check back here for the next video in the stool building series.